Well, hello! Hey. I gotta tell you, I love groups like this. You folks are great Americans, living out your freedom, letting your voice be heard, letting your values be counted. 233 years ago, a smaller group came together and said, we're gonna let our voice be heard, we're gonna make sure our values are counted. And they gathered in that rented room we now call Independence Hall. And they knew that what they were about to do was commit treason. Now these guys, you got to think about what was happening. I mean, this was a bittersweet moment. I mean, here they were going to validate everything they've been discussing for years. They were going to actually birth freedom for a nation. They were going to change the world. They were going to turn it upside down and finally put the people at the source of freedom, coming directly from God to the people and then to government, rather than from God to government and then the people only receiving what they could get from government. These guys get together in that room, according to Benjamin Rush, one of those signers of the Declaration of Independence. He said that when they gathered that day, they knew it was a death warrant. They knew this was it. And yet they were willing to come together in total silence, thinking about what they were about to commit to. And Secretary Thompson was the guy at the front of the room. He had the Declaration laid out there on the table, the silver inkwell you can still see when you go to Independence Hall, the two feathered pens. He began to call them forward. Now, I got to mess up your history today. It was not July 4th, okay? This was August 2nd. July 4th, only Thompson and John Hancock signed. August 2nd is when everybody else came in to put their name on the dotted line. So here they come. They're all sitting there, and Thompson starts on his right with the delegation from New Hampshire. He says, Josiah Bartlett of New Hampshire. Bartlett gets up, he comes forward, takes out the pen, dips it in the ink, and in total silence, he signs the Declaration of Independence, goes back and he sits down. One by one they come. John Hart of New Jersey, and Hart gets up, he comes forward, takes the pen. You can hear it scratching along the surface of the Declaration of Independence. Everyone comes in silence until a guy by the name of Elbridge Gerry is called forward. Now, how many of y'all have heard of Elbridge Gerry? Do we have any Elbridge Gerry fans? Is the Elbridge Gerry fan club here? No one's heard of it? Okay. Elbridge Gerry, we never heard of him. He's not a very popular founding father. He did actually become vice president later, but here's all you need to know about him for this particular story. Elbridge Gerry was the smallest of our founding fathers. Little bitty guy. I mean, he was barely 5'1", all right? He was not the towering 7-foot Hulk Hogan type specimen that stands before you speaking at the moment. I don't know what this group thinks so funny. Come on, we all have dreams. Help me out here. All right, seriously, I'm a little guy, all right? This guy was even smaller than me. And the founders would joke with him about how little he was. And so when he gets up to go sign the Declaration, no one has said anything. And all of a sudden, from the back of the room, there's this big guy, the largest of the founding fathers, Colonel Benjamin Harrison, and he decides to break the silence of the most important political moment in history with these words. He says to the little guy up front, everything. And yet they were willing to get up among their brethren, come forward, take that pen out, dip it in the ink, and sign beneath that amazing final sentence. It says, in support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. Now those were true patriots. They didn't just get excited at a rally, sign a petition, go home and forget about it. No, every one of them followed through on the commitment. Every one of them were willing to give it all. They gave their lives. They gave their fortunes. They were willing to stand up with the courage to speak out, regardless of what it cost them. And as a result, they put in place the most successful nation in the history of the world. Now, I know a lot of people in Washington, D.C., they don't really care about those founding documents anymore. Judging by their actions and the things they're doing with our country right now, they're ignoring the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. So I am glad that you remember. I know that the people that are gathered all over the country and organizations like this, groups like this, we recognize the importance of those documents. We still respect them. And I want to remind our elected officials of a small portion out of the Declaration of Independence. It says, but when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to provide new guards for their future security. In other words, what they were saying was when the government abuses you so much that you can't take it anymore, you have not only the right, but the responsibility and the duty to stand up and say no more. You're exercising that responsibility today. You are fulfilling that duty by standing up and saying to the folks in Washington, D.C., no more. Now, we're going to talk about those new guards for our security that we need to provide, but Let's think about what that long train of abuses and usurpations was that would cause these founding fathers to risk everything and commit treason. I'm just going to read one of them to you. This is the one I think is really repeating itself now in our country. But here's the way that Thomas Jefferson listed it. It was number 10 out of 27, and I think it's loud and clear in America today. This is what they complained about King George. He has erected a multitude of new offices and sent forth hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out our substance. Does that sound familiar? Let me show you something. This is a multitude of new offices. This is the government takeover of healthcare. That's how many new offices will be created. That's how many new officers will be harassing you and harassing me and eating out our substance in order to pay for their way as government bureaucrats.
A lady coming.
Now, friends, our founding fathers revolted over that kind of nonsense. They were unwilling to put up with that. That was what they were getting. Taxation without representation. Look at what we're getting with representation. It is time for us to say enough. It's time for us to revolt. Now, not with bullets. We get to revolt with ballots. They put in place a system that allows us to change the world, to change our system without having to take up arms. We're able to do it peaceably through a system that is the greatest in the history of the world. We're able to change the world simply by getting involved, giving of our lives, our fortunes, our sacred honor. That's simply your time, it's your money, and it's the courage to stand up and speak the truth. That's what you're doing today. You're giving of your life. You're giving of your fortune, taking time to be here, and you've got the courage to stand up. So I want to thank you for investing in the next generation and being willing to get involved. I know some of you, this is the first time. I'll tell you what excites me about what's happening in our country right now. I'm getting calls and emails from people all over the country that I would have had to have hogtied and drug them to a meeting like this a year ago. Now they're calling and saying, where do I go? What do I do? Who do I get involved with? They're saying, where do I write the check? Who do I write the check to? Is that happening to you? I mean, you have neighbors calling you saying, people that have never been involved before are now saying, what do I do? How do I get involved? To me, that's exciting. That means the American people have woken up. They have realized that they don't want what's been handed to them. I don't want to depress you today by giving you too much of a litany of what's happened in the last year, but let me give you just a few examples. Hey, don't worry, there's good news at the end of this, okay? But if you look at what's happened in just the last few months of our nation, we have the President of the United States hiring and firing CEOs of major corporations. We have the Federal Reserve empowered now to micromanage private businesses and tell them how to run their business. We have more czars than any communist country ever dreamed of having. And we're talking about czars like John Holdren that thinks that forced abortions and sterilization is the way to control the population. We're talking about avowed socialist, avowed communist. It's unbelievable. If I had woken up and read the paper and seen the things that are happening in this country 15 years ago, I would have swore it was happening in the Soviet Union, but it's happening right here in America.